listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? Welcome into our Week 13 preview. This time, it's going to be just Joe and I. Jeff had some family issues he had to deal with. We wish him well. But Joe, you're stuck with just me today.
Boo.
There are no refunds. There are no returns. You are SOL.
Hey, I heard you're going to be making an appearance on the Roto Bros podcast.
I am. Actually, after we finish recording this, I'm going to hop on with Mark and Chris and talk about you for a little while.
I'll be listening. I can make you sound silly. Don't forget that.
I mean, you can make me sound silly on this show, but you don't. So
you don't need any help in that department, Murph.
Fair enough. All right, Joe, let's dive right in. Let's not waste any time for this episode. I want to start out by talking about something that we kind of talked about not doing to start the season, but is really important towards this part of the season, towards the latter part, preparing for your playoff push, getting handcuffs. Now, I've heard two different takes on this, whether you own your own handcuff or one of your opponent's major handcuffs. Which one do you prefer doing? Like, would you rather go get the CMC handcuff instead of your own guy, or do you want to own the player that you have the starter for right now?
I want the best handcuff because I'm trying to maximize my upside. I don't care which one it is.
So it's always best player available, not just like your handcuff. I mean, it depends on the team, I guess, though, right? Like if you have a preference or...
Yeah, it's more based on roster construction than it is a steadfast rule because say you've got three really, really solid running backs. Like you drafted Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, and Chris Carson. You're solid. At that point, drafting the other guy's handcuff, like say you go out and try and find Tony Pollard. If Zeke goes down, Tony Pollard probably isn't making your lineup anyway with those three options. But flip that coin over. If you have Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, and your third running back is like Nyheim Hines, then you want to go out and grab like Alexander Mattison because if Dalvin Cook goes down, then all of a sudden you have a viable third running back to throw in your flex spot with a safe floor and a high ceiling every week.
So the handcuffs most likely out there right now, you've got a small list here. Tony Pollard, Alexander Mattison, Raquel Armstead, Alex Arma. Who would you take first?
It's kind of a toss-up between Alexander Mattison and Tony Pollard. Those guys are the two clear-cut best handcuff options out there. And I think that it's really close, but I would probably lean Tony Pollard just because I think that he gets a more substantial workload. I think that they're still going to split carries in Minnesota if Dalvin Cook goes down. And if Zeke goes down, Tony Pollard's got the entire workload unless he screws it up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't roster many handcuffs in my leagues, but then again, I'm not winning any right now. So what can I say on that one? Probably need to get better, right?
You know, I don't think that rostering handcuffs is something that anyone that's not in the hunt should do. I think it's one of those moves that you make once your roster is solidified and you can really go out there and get rid of guys that are just the fat at the back end of your roster. I do think we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention Raquel Armstead for a moment, though. If Leonard Fournette goes down, which he has done many times in his career, Raquel Armstead might be just as good as those other guys I've mentioned. I don't think he's quite as talented a player, but he's very good, and he might get the workload to make it not matter at all.
All right, Joe, well, let's dive into the meat of the show. And as always, we'll start out with some news and some notes.
News and notes from across the NFL.
All right, first up, good news for you Jack Doyle owners. Eric Ebron is heading to IR. And Joe, you are excited about Jack Doyle now.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks to lose Eric Ebron, but I talked about it early on in the season and during the preseason. It sucks these guys have two tight ends because when one of them is off the field, the other one is fantastic. If you look at what happens when Eric Ebron is off the field to Jack Doyle's opportunity, he moves from a 3.4% target share to a 21.5% target share. His red zone target share goes from 8.8% to 20%. DFS or otherwise, Jack Doyle is the nuts rest of the season. You absolutely have to pick him up if he's on the waiver wire. And if you're competing in a dynasty format and you still haven't passed your trade deadline, go trade a pick for Jack Doyle if the Jack Doyle owner is out of it, because he's not going to be that valuable to them later, and he might be able to win you a championship.
And now that you said that, we're going to get the resurgence of Mo Alley Cox.
I mean, it's possible. Mo Alley Cox goes from a 0% target share to a 4.7% target share, but I think that Mo Alley Cox pretty much plays the blocking role and Jack Doyle becomes the stone cold nuts.
Yeah, my joke aside, I 100% am with you on that. Jack Doyle is he's one of my number one waiver targets in most of my leagues this week.
Like, let's not forget, before Eric Ebron arrived, Jack Doyle was in the conversation as a borderline elite tight end pick.
I remember. To quote South Park.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
All right, next up, while we're on this injury train, Hunter Renfro's season is likely over pending further tests. In Sunday's matchup, he broke a rib and punctured a lung, and that hurt to say.
Sorry, Murph. I don't really have that much to say about this. Might help out some of those other pass catchers like Darren Waller and Tyrell Williams, because those guys have kind of fallen off the map since the emergence of Hunter Renfrow. But it's kind of just tough to see because it seems like that offense is still becoming a cohesive unit. I don't think they're there yet in any regard.
Yeah, and I hate this kind of injury a lot too, because it reminds me of the Keenan Allen thing where he had a lacerated kidney. These internal injuries are completely unpredictable, and it just really sucks to see them happen to players. However, I will say this, don't forget about Hunter Renfrow. If you have somebody in a dynasty league that you think might forget about him, wait a month or two. Once the season's over, make an offer. Because I think next year, once he's healthy, he's going to bounce back and he's going to be an integral part of that offense. I'm not going to say Cooper Kupp style, but similar.
This is also one of those situations where people might be dropping him to go pick up a handcuff or pick up another flyer wide receiver, because if you owned Hunter Renfrow, you probably didn't have the most solidified roster in the first place. So just check the waiver wire, see if he gets dropped. That's one of the things that I like to do a lot this time of the year, because people are having to make some tough decisions. So just watch the transaction log and see if there's a guy you could pick up.
All right, next up, in debatably less depressing news, Andy Dalton will return to the starting job in Cincinnati starting this week, and the Jags are going to stick with Nick Foles. Where's Gardner?
I miss you.
Oh, man, the Andy Dalton news is exciting for me. I have 15 shares of Tyler Boyd, including best ball, so he had a great week last week, and I think there's just more of that on the horizon with Andy Dalton coming back on the field.
I mean, if you look at his targets early in the season with Andy Dalton, he was getting peppered with them. And then later in the season, as they went, to backups, it kind of fell off. Yes, Tyler Boyd is definitely getting a huge boost from this.
Just to put some numbers with that narrative, with Andy Dalton on the field, Tyler Boyd had a 24.6% target share. With him off the field, 18%. That is a massive bump. And even if you look at his quality of target too, his average depth of target with Andy Dalton is 8.95. It's 6.909 without him. So this is a situation where not only does his opportunity increase, but his quality of opportunity increases as well. I could not be more excited about this.
And we'll probably hear about him in your cheap dates this week.
Maybe. I think he's just a little bit too pricey. I think he's $5,200, but I'll probably have him in that lineup anyway.
Yeah, so you can pay for C-Mac. You always pay up for C-Mac, right?
Always pay up for C-Mac. I mean, it's crazy because he only gets you 2.5 to 3.5x on your money. So he's not usually a tournament winning play like Derrick Henry and Leonard Fournette were this week, but he's certainly in play for cash each and every week.
All right, that does it for news and notes. Let's dive into our cheap date review. And since Jeff is in here, we'll have to give him his cookies when we can. But we're starting with quarterbacks. Jeff had Nick Foles, 14.88. Joe, you had Baker Mayfield, 27.58. And I had Sam Darnold at 31.2. I say you and I killed quarterbacks this week.
Absolutely crushed it. And there was one more quarterback that we didn't pick that absolutely smashed too. Ryan Tannehill was super good. I talked about it a lot on the Roto Bros DFS Fantasy Takeaway crossover Patreon podcast that Mark and I are doing. It was the week to pay down for quarterback. The chalk crapped the bed and the low-owned guys smashed.
So between those three guys, we predicted 3 of the top 4 quarterbacks for the week. I'm going to give us a pat on the back.
Yep.
Before we move on from quarterbacks, I do want to bring up Jameis Winston. We talked about the top 4, and he's the only quarterback we didn't talk about on the last show in the top 4. But we live in a universe where he can potentially lead the league in both touchdowns and interceptions. He's leading, obviously, in interceptions already, but he's only 2 touchdowns behind Russell Wilson for the lead. So we live in a universe where that could happen.
That's crazy. It's so crazy to see somebody keep their job after throwing that many interceptions, let alone throw that many touchdowns as well.
Yeah, 6 more interceptions than any other quarterback in the NFL. He's on pace for 4,932 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 29 interceptions.
Wow. 29 interceptions would be insane.
And yet he'd still be a top fantasy option. That is just flabbergasting.
Yeah, and they won with him throwing 2 interceptions this last week. He's just astounding.
I think it also helps having Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Like, having those 2 guys is elite.
More on that later.
All right, moving into running backs. Jeff had Benny Snell 11.3. Joe, you had Darius Geis at 4.8, and I had Tariq Cohen at 12.4. I pulled out the win here in running backs, but I'm not proud of it. And honestly, I was with you on Darius Geis, so this kind of hurt me as well.
Yeah, I think that I'm still on the Darius Geis train. I think he looks good on film. He's getting his snap share went up to almost 50% this week. I'll still play him. I don't know if I'll do it in DFS, especially not in cash, but I think if you're desperate, he's still a solid asset to own.
I personally also think he might be a dynasty target for me, like towards the start of the offseason when you can start making trades again. Because right now, I feel like Callahan is just enamored with AP and he's going to make AP the lead back. But next year, new head coach, hopefully, give Darius Geis a chance. And I mean, if I can buy low on him, I'm going to do it everywhere I can.
You know, you should do it now if you want to buy low on Darius Geis. And I think if you can, you should. It might be kind of a tough sell to try and get the Darius Geis owner to sell him at this point, just because he or she has had Darius Geis on their IR forever. But man, this is the time. This is the best buy low timing.
Yeah, I agree. And I can feel that whole holding him for a while thing. I was the Bell owner and I denied several offers in the offseason this past year because I was like, nah, I've held him for a whole year. I can't get rid of him now. So that definitely factors in.
Yep.
All right, on to wide receiver. Jeff had Randall Cobb, 12.6. Joe had Tim Patrick, 1.3. And I had Hunter Renfrow, 6.1. Damn, that injury, man. I could have actually challenged Jeff. 12.6 wasn't that much.
I mean, you put together a solid lineup anyway. That 6.1 didn't crap your team at all.
I want the total victory. I want to crush you into submission, Joe.
Man, Tim Patrick was disappointing. That whole Broncos offense was disappointing. They gave Cortland Sutton like 9 targets and he only caught 1 of them. Like, why are you targeting a wide receiver against Tre'Davious White? They need to figure out what they have at quarterback. Get Drew Lock in there.
From all the accounts I've seen, it's probably going to be this week. They haven't ruled him out and they're talking about it. I think this week or next week for sure.
It's going to be bad. Don't play your Broncos.
Oh, yeah.
That. It's going to kill Cortland Sutton, but they need to figure it out.
So what you're saying is that somebody who's still willing to pay a decent amount for Cortland Sutton, trade him now?
Yeah, I would do that for sure with all of the issues that they're going to have on that offense. Definitely.
All right, moving on to tight end. Jeff had Mike Gesicki, 11.8. Joe, you had Vance McDonald, 1.1. And I picked Darren Fells, 3.4. Which is not a good week for tight ends for us.
It wasn't a good week for tight ends at all. Like, Mike Gesicki was pretty good. He had the touchdown. But I was talking about 3/4 of the way through the first game. And I was like, don't worry, guys. If your tight end is crapping the bed, you are not alone because everybody's tight end is crapping the bed. It was like 6 minutes left in the game I was watching, and there was 2 tight ends that had more than 8 points, and one of them was Caden Smith. Like, in just straight PPR scoring, Zach Ertz crushed, George Kittle crushed, Jared Cook crushed. Caden Smith had 12.7, Mike Gesicki had 11.8. Those were the only tight ends that scored more than 11 points. Logan Thomas and Ryan Griffin scored 10 plus. Everyone else was sub 10. So many good tight ends crap the bed.
You remember yesterday when I asked you if I should play George Kittle or Vance McDonald because I was worried about George Kittle still being hurt?
I was too, man. That was hard.
Yeah, but we all move on, man. All right, on to defenses. Jeff and Joe had the Bengals this week, 6 points, and I had the Seahawks, 17. Yeah.
Yeah, you crushed it, man. I really didn't expect that game to go the way that it did. And I think the Carson Wentz injury had something to do with it. But holy cow, was that a strange game script?
Yeah, I didn't see it coming either. I was just hoping for like 2 or 3 sacks to salvage the day, kind of get the 6 to 8 point range that you guys got. And I just got really lucky. That's kind of how DFS is. It feels like at the defensive position when you're going for a cheap date. It's a lot of luck.
Yeah, you got to score a touchdown to really smash that position. Like one of the defenses we didn't even mention was Washington, and Washington was like the nuts this week.
All right. So our final lineups, Jeff's not here to do his, but he paid up for players like Alvin Kamara, Julio Jones, Golden Tate, and Saquon Barkley. Just an unlucky week for him. Those guys didn't like crap the bed completely. Kamara still got you almost 20 points, but definitely not what you're expecting. Joe, looking at your final lineup, any final takeaways?
You can't fade CMC in cash. Like if you fade CMC in cash, you're probably not hitting the line unless you get super lucky. I really liked this lineup, man. Michael Thomas was great. Devontae Parker was great. I scored 131.88. I would win this almost every week that we play this thing with this score. So good job, Murph.
All right. So I actually won the cheap dates this week. And again, I want to point out that I have not come in third once this season. I've always been the silver medal and the occasional win. So at least I'm not the bottom guy this year.
I think it's your safety. Jeff is like the never safe guy. He always plays the upside play, and that works for him. Like he scored 200 plus points that one time in cheap dates. But it also means you're going to have your 100 point or sub 100 point weeks too. I think I lean a little bit further that way than you do. Like your guys are just safe.
Yeah, I'm a little sad about Jamison Crowder, 3.8 points. I don't think any of us saw that coming. It was a weird week for him. But Derrick Henry was the nuts, 32.5. Like you said, you got to play Christian McCaffrey in cash. And players like Sam Darnold and Tariq Cohen kind of helped push me over there. Devontae Parker, you and I were consensus on. So it was just a good week in my lineup. I wish I'd hit tight end. There are better options. But again, like you said, not many better options.
Yeah, like who was playing Caden Smith? I played Caden Smith in one tournament lineup, but I wasn't about to go out there and say Caden Smith is a great play this week. Like Vance McDonald and Darren Fells both had the markers to say they were going to be good plays, but everyone just crapped the bed.
Something I kind of want to add on to what you just said about the safe kind of roster. I think that's one of the differences that I've noticed between you and me in fantasy over the last 2 years playing against you in a couple separate leagues, where you seem to do a little bit better than me. I'm never like out of the playoffs, or if I am, I'm just outside the playoffs, but I'm a good team. I'm safe, but I don't win championships. The little bit more risk is something I need to do better as a fantasy player that I think you've got more of a handle on. And that's why you're always in the finals or making, deep runs in the playoffs in almost every league we're in. And I feel like that's something that our listeners should take away from this as well. Don't be afraid to take risks. A lot of times I'll use the safe play as my excuse to play a player. And that's not always the best thing to do. It's something I still am working on as I progress as a player throughout my fantasy career.
Here is an example of that. Cole Beasley and John Brown were right next to each other in ADP. Like you could have drafted them in the same round really easily. John Brown's the upside play there. He's risky. He gets injured more, but he has the opportunity in most games to score 30 points. And Cole Beasley, like he might get you 20 if he gets a touchdown, but his ADOT just simply isn't high enough to go out there and smash for you. So like I look for that upside play all the time. Like I'm drafting Terry McLaurin at the end of the draft. Like you can drop those players if they don't hit, but if they do hit, you're awesome. The one issue there is if your league pays out like fourth place, like I'm in 3 leagues where I'm just out of it. There's no way that I'm going to succeed. And that's because I took these risks and they didn't hit.
All right. That'll do it for our cheap date review. Joe, you ready to dive into some booth reviews?
Booth review.
All right. Well, Joe, you're up first. What was your first what to watch for last week?
My first what to watch for last week was that Falcons defense and whether or not they were going to continue to be as good as they've been over the past 2 weeks. And they were not. Jameis Winston absolutely smashed them, even though they had those 2 interceptions on him. And Chris Godwin absolutely broke the slate. I was starting to worry about my Chris Godwin shares, and then he comes out and does this. I think you have to deal with the highs and the lows, because if you take him out of your lineup at any point, he is going to give you a 30-plus point week on your bench.
So I'm convinced that he's not human. Follow me on this one. The up weeks are when he's, full go, ready to go. And the down weeks are when they're making slight adjustments in the shop, oil changes, tune-ups. When they get him back roaring, though, he's not human. Like, it's ridiculous.
Did you see that catch he had in the end zone on that tipped ball?
Yes, you're making my point for me. He's not a human being.
It was absolutely insane. Like, it was one of those, it wasn't a highlight reel catch in the same way that like Odell Beckham's catch was a highlight reel catch, but it was close. It was a really, really good football play, man. That was crazy.
The kind of play that makes you stop and stare for a minute and just go, wow.
Yup.
All right, on to mine. And I was watching the Bears running backs, and at this point, I'm just straight Cohen or bust. In a great matchup with the Giants when they got up on him pretty good, Montgomery could only muster 5 points. He's still a must-hold in Dynasty, but unless you're desperate, I can't endorse playing David Montgomery anymore in 2019, regardless of the matchup. Get Tariq Cohen or don't play a Bears running back, period.
Yeah, like Tariq Cohen is the play because he catches balls on the outside and he's got the speed to break one at any point. He's pretty elusive, too. The problem with David Montgomery is a guy that needs good blocking in front of him, and Chicago has been atrocious. They're 28th in power rank, 32nd in second level rank, and 28th in open field rank. That's almost as bad as it gets. Like, they're not Miami, but they're damn close.
All right, Joe, back to you. What was your second what to watch for?
My second what to watch for was the San Francisco defense, and I'm going to give them credit on this. They were absolutely great against Aaron Rodgers and that Packers offense. But Matt LaFleur, what are you thinking? We have 3 games in a row where the San Francisco defense has given up a ton of points. And you know how they did that? Tempo. All of those offenses were running up tempo. They were getting up to the line of scrimmage quickly. They weren't allowing San Francisco to rotate defensive linemen on that elite defensive line. You're running the play clock down to 5 seconds or less on every single play. Do you even watch the film? I'm serious here. Matt LaFleur, do you even watch the film?
I believe the answer is no.
It's crazy. They're like, we can't get out of our plan. And I'm like, yes, you can. Your plan was awful.
I hate that whole we have a plan for the whole game. You need to be flexible. You think Bill Belichick has a plan in every game? He literally preaches situational football, and he's got, 6 rings? Come on.
That's why they come out and score more points on offense in the second half and give up fewer points on defense in the second half. They don't stick with the plan. They adjust to the other team's game plan. That's like football 101.
Let's send Matt LaFleur back to school.
Yeah, he needs it, man. He didn't deserve that job.
All right, well, back to me. And I was watching that Browns offense, man. I really was hoping to be a confidence builder for fantasy, owners of Chubb, Landry, Hunt, and so on. And you know what? Yes, it was. If you played any Browns starter, you were happy. I don't think the hesitation is gone because you still worry about that Browns offense regressing to what we saw at the start of the season, but Baker's been doing pretty well. They looked really good, and they have a really easy strength of schedule going forward. So, this built about as much confidence as I was hoping for.
The Browns have the Bengals twice down the stretch. Like, those are games that you're really going to want to target those players. I was worried about my Odell Beckham shares. I was worried about my few Baker Mayfield shares. And I'm still worried for games like the one they have against Pittsburgh this week. I think I'll play him in every week except the Baltimore week, though, and I'll probably throw OBJ out there regardless.
And I think we're looking at Nick Chubb as a legitimate league winner still at this point. Kareem Hunt didn't do very much in this game, but they still gave Chubb a great workload, and he got a lot done with it. So he's not going anywhere. That was one of the worries when Hunt came back, was how much was he going to eat up? Is he going to eat up more and more each week? Nah, this is Chubb's backfield. Hunt just gets to play a part.
Do you know what the crazy part about that is, though?
What?
They were both on the field for 43 snaps, 56.6% of the team snaps. The big difference was that Nick Chubb's touch percentage was 55.8% and Kareem Hunt's was only 23.3% on the plays that they were on the field. So he did get way more usage, but they were on the field for the exact same number of plays.
If Kareem Hunt is off the roster next season, I think he's a top 5 pick conversation kind of guy.
Yeah, I think if you're talking overall, he's right on the fringe there, but I think he's at worst a mid-first round pick kind of guy. even if they still have Kareem Hunt. I think that they've proven they're giving him the workload that it doesn't matter.
Well, that derailed him this year. I mean, we were talking about him as a top 5 pick before they signed Kareem Hunt. So I don't know. I still think definitely first round material.
When we were looking at that, I don't think that we saw this coming, the way that they were going to utilize both backs. They've used Hunt as a receiver and as a second running back with Chubb on the field significantly more than I expected.
I like to think Todd Monken just like slammed his hand against the wall and was like, no, we're doing this my way now.
I hope so, man. They've looked a lot better over these last few weeks.
I 100% agree. Thank goodness. All right, that'll do it for Booth Review. Let's dive into some waiver wire talk. Let's tap the wire.
Tapping the wire.
All right, we're skipping quarterbacks. At this point of the season, you're streaming or you've got your guy. There's no need to talk about quarterbacks on the waiver wire. So let's dive right into running backs. I've got Rashad Penny, Benny Snell, and Bo Scarborough. I do have some asterisks here, though. Rashad Penny, I'm not going to get super hyped after this game. I still think the usage is going to lean towards Chris Carson, so don't get him expecting 100 yards every game like he got this week. It was a nice show, but I don't think he's won the job outright. And Bo Scarborough has tough matchups ahead. He's only for running back needy teams in very deep leagues. They play Denver, Chicago, Minnesota, and Tampa Bay. None of those are good for running backs.
No, I'm not thrilled about any of these pickups at running back. I think that if you're picking up a flyer or you're picking up a handcuff, I'd still call all three of these guys flyers. I'd pick up the handcuff.
And I feel like the one you'd want to pick up out of these three is Benny Snell, because yes, he's the handcuff, but at this point with Connor's durability issues, he might be the handcuff that gets the most work at the end of the season, despite like a major injury to somebody else.
And when you look at the game film, the between the tackles running, Benny Snell has miles and miles on Jalen Samuels. It's not even close. If he can start to carve out a little bit of a role in the passing game because of how much better he is in the running game, he could be one of those league-winning running backs down the stretch if James Conner can't get back on the field.
Do you have any low-owned guys, Joe, or do we pretty much cover those on the handcuffs earlier in the show?
I think we pretty much got him on the handcuffs. I think the guy that we just barely mentioned that maybe we should talk about is Alex Arma, because most people were looking at Reggie Bonifon as the all-out handcuff to Christian McCaffrey, and I'm not sure which one it is, but Alex Arma got significantly more work for the Panthers this last week than did Bonifon. So who knows? Maybe it's still Bonifon, but Alex Arma is a guy you might want to look at, especially in Dynasty.
All right, fair enough. Let's move into wide receivers. The first guy on my list makes me angry because I think he's been on more tapping the wires this year than anybody else, but he's still owned, the Beazles. Then I've got A.J. Brown, Russell Gage, and James Washington. I think most of these guys are repeat offenders. We've told people to pick these guys up.
Yep. Russell Gage seems like he's carving out a role in that offense. It's not a high ADOT role, so he's not going to be that huge upside player. And the matchup this last week was about as good as it gets. So I'm not saying go pick up Russell Gage and start him at this point, but he's worth an own. I think A.J. Brown, though, is startable. I think in a good matchup, you can throw A.J. Brown out there. He's gotten the workload.
Yeah, I really like A.J. Brown. And I mean, Ryan Tannehill's been a really solid quarterback since starting. I mean, he had a really rough starting week in Denver in week 6, but going forward, week 7, 19.18, week 8, 19.42, week 9, 23.04. You get the picture, but he hasn't scored less than 18 points any of the games after his first one. A.J. Brown's going to get a lot of targets and a good number of potential touchdowns. I mean, it's just a good scoring offense now. And they have to respect Derrick Henry, so they're going to have a little bit less coverage.
Yeah, it's kind of a situation where they don't want to throw the football all that much, but teams are going to start forcing them to throw the football if Derrick Henry keeps smashing the way that he has. So I think Ryan Tannehill is pretty solid, man. 7 games is how many games he started this year. In the last 7 games played, Ryan Tannehill is QB 14. He's right there with Jimmy Garoppolo. So he's not an elite play by any means, but he can definitely get you by as a streamer or a situational starter.
All right, Joe, any low-owned guys?
The one low-owned guy that I have is just a rental for this week if you're absolutely desperate, because Taylor Gabriel is in the concussion protocol and they play their game on Thursday on Thanksgiving. So it's Javon Wims. I don't think he's a great play. Most of the guys that we've talked about as low-owned players have been owned players over the last few weeks. So Javon Wims is really the only one I've got, and I wouldn't start him anywhere unless I was absolutely desperate.
All right, moving into tight ends, and this is actually kind of exciting. We have two really solid options to pick up at tight end. We've already talked about Jack Doyle, so we don't need to go into depth on that one. But David Njoku is returning from IR, and the Browns, like we've talked about earlier in the show, have a really good end-of-season schedule. I mean, for the tight end position, it almost doesn't get any better, and Baker Mayfield's been looking a lot better. So I really think David Njoku, if you don't get Jack Doyle, is the next best option.
I would pick both of these guys up, even if it's just to stash, even if you're like a George Kittle owner, a Travis Kelce owner, a Zach Ertz owner. These guys are ownable even on those teams. We talk a lot about how you shouldn't own two tight ends, but this time of year, in the same way that you should go out and start picking up handcuffs, go grab that other tight end, because if yours goes down, you need to have a good option at that position if you're competing. And also, you can block the other teams from picking up these guys at a position of massive scarcity.
All right, that does it for cheap dates per se, but let's talk about quarterbacks a little bit here at the end from the streamer perspective, not the guys you're picking up playing the rest of the season. But let's talk about guys that you can pick up and play in decent matchups the rest of the season. Joe, do you have anybody you want to throw out?
He's on a terrible football team, but we mentioned him earlier in the show. Andy Dalton is at home versus the Jets on Sunday at 1 Eastern. I think he's a guy that you can absolutely look at. And since he wasn't starting, he's going to be almost 0% owned in most leagues. Then you can kind of look at Nick Foles. He's got a nice matchup at home against the Buccaneers. I'm not super thrilled about Daniel Jones. I probably wouldn't play Ryan Fitzpatrick with how well that Eagles team has been playing. So I think those are probably the two guys that I'm going to look at the most. If Jacoby Brissett's out there, he's got a really nice matchup with the Titans at home. Beyond those guys, I think that you might be in trouble. I'm not a big Jeff Driscoll guy. Ryan Finley's obviously off the board because Andy Dalton's starting. So I think those are my three best options this week.
Yeah, I think you covered all the guys I was thinking about as well. So yeah, that's quarterback streamers. Again, not guys you want to pick up the whole rest of the season, but solid place for this week. And of course, we'll get into more of those in our cheap dates on the next show.
Yep. But if you need to grab one on the waiver wire, I think it's Andy Dalton for me.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to bench him anymore. So, I mean, he's going to play the rest of the season, and he's got good options at receiving. And, I mean, good options in the running back position as well to throw the ball to and check down. So, there's no downside to Andy Dalton except for the fact that he plays for the Bengals.
Yep. That offensive line's awful. He could get hurt, but he's worth the start in most games where he has a good matchup.
We got out here pretty quick. No Jeff. That's it's depressing. We wish Jeff the best.
Yep.
And he won't be on our next show as well because he's going out of town. So, it's just you and me this week.
That's true. We are going to do a bonus episode this week. Mark from the Roto Bros podcast and I have decided to do a Thanksgiving slate breakdown. We're going to record that on Tuesday, release it on Wednesday. And I believe that we're going to release that one to the public, not just the Patreon. So if you haven't checked out one of those episodes yet, check that one out because it's going to be free.
Wow, and I wasn't invited? Man, I feel so left out.
You want to come? We're recording it tomorrow.
Nah, I'm good. I'm going to take a nap when I get off work.
Right on.
All right, we'll be back on Thursday with our cheat dates and all the other fun stuff from our Thursday episodes. For Joe at Human Stat Shit on Twitter, for myself at MurphyFT, and for Jeff at NFL_DiMatteo. We'll see you guys next week. No more dad jokes. Bye.
Later.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.